Okay, let's take a look at the early Minoans. What island are the Minoans from, guys? What island in Greece? Can you name the island? Anybody? No? Oh, Mr. Tommy. Good job, Tommy. Crete. See this little island over here, Crete? Anybody here been to Crete? So this island is called Crete, and it's in the middle of the Mediterranean, in between Egypt and Greece, the mainland. It's a really interesting location because it's in the center of the Eastern Mediterranean. Okay, it's a really good location. So it was a strategic point for trade. So if you can see, you have Greece to the north, you have Egypt to the south, you have Asia Minor and the Hittite Empire over here, you have the Mesopotamia and Israel over here. So you got lots going on. You got Italy over here. So you can see it's in the middle of the Mediterranean world here. And in terms of trade, you can see oil and cloth. Olive oil is a big one, and pottery, and see who they're trading with and what they're bringing in. So you see there's lots of trade in the ancient world. This is around 1500 or so. Yeah, 1570 BC. Anything stick out to you here? Anything you find very interesting or something you didn't know looking at this picture? Okay, so when we think of the Minoans, we think of the island of Crete. Okay, Crete, the island. When we think of the Myceneans, we think of Mycenae. Okay, this Mycenae, which is a city. And here's Troy, of course, and here's Mycenae. So here's Crete in the Minoans, and here's Mycenae in the Peloponnesian island of right over here, Mycenae. So you can see the distance. Now let's take a look at the Minoan map, or sorry, the Mycenean map. So 500 years later, this is a map of Mycenae now. Also early Greeks. And you could see who they're trading with as well. Got Italy here, Egypt, the Hittites, the Aegean Sea, and the Ionian Sea is in Italy. So Ionian over here, the Aegean, and here's the Mediterranean. These are the important seas. So looking at this map, both of these maps, what makes the geography of Greece so unique or different? What are some advantages and disadvantages? What do you think? What are some advantages and disadvantages looking at a map like this for Greece? Yes, good. Sea routes and trade. If you're located on an island, you better be good shipbuilders, right? Better be good traders. Food, fish, not okay, not very farmable. Yes, good. Good. What else? List them. Okay. Oh, good. In foreign in invasions. Yep. Mm-hmm. David, can you read this for me, please? Good. Thank you. Let me paste that. Good. Advantages, natural barriers, right? The sea and mountains and for trade. Disadvantage, important. Unification is difficult, right? Because there are so many isolated different city states. Okay. This is a look at the allies that will be later on in our Greek timeline. Athens and its allies in green, Sparta and its allies in pink. Let's take a closer look at the geography, guys. Let's take a closer look at the geography. Tina, would you like to read for me, please?
Sure, sir. Okay, so describe the characteristics of ancient Greece's geography. Do you want me to read all the cities?
Um, no, but again, just quickly, when you look at this map here, what stands out? What do you see? You see lots of mountains, right? What else do you see?
Lots of mountains, lots of little islands just spread out in the Aegean Sea.
Aegean, yep, Aegean, yeah.
Aegean, sorry. And also, what's interesting is Mount Olympus in Olympia.
Mm,
Those cities are named after, I think it's from Greek mythology.
yep,
Isn't Mount Olympus where the gods are supposed to reside?
good, yep.
So I think that's really interesting.
You got Olympia and Mount Olympus, Delphi, Corinth, Athens, Sparta, right? These are all very, very important city states, especially Corinth. Corinth is just very unique, and we're going to talk about that, right? Being in the middle of Sparta and Athens. Okay, keep reading. So, geographic features, please.
So geographic features. Number one, the sea. Heavy influence on the physical environment of Greece. So the Aegean Sea and Ionian Sea. Number two, mountains with narrow valleys. They cover more than 3/4 of Greece's surface area. Number three is the islands. There's more than 2,000 islands, and Crete being the largest. And number four, the climate. Winter was mild, and the summer mild climate, and the summer was hot climate with rainfall from October to March, which was a very long growing season.
Good. Thank you. You got climate, which is very nice, mild climate in Greece. Lots of islands, lots of mountains, and the Aegean and the Ionian Sea are the two most important. The effects of geography, Tina.
So the effects of geography, we have seafaring tradition, which is a reliance on navy and fleets for power and protection. There's trade and cultural links. So sea provided link to trade and cultural exchange with Mediterranean communities. Isolationism, protection but lack of effective communication. Polis, so independent city states. Greece was organized into separated by seas and rugged mountains, and there was emergence of dominant city states such as Athens and Sparta.
Good. So the poli, or the city state, the independent city state of Greece. That's what Greece was. It wasn't called Greece, right? It was just a bunch of city states at the time for Hellas, right? That's Greece, city-states. And the two most dominant as we get into the classics would be Athens and Sparta. We're going to learn a lot about them. Take a look at all these cities. And Tina, tell us some of the resources that we have here.
Okay, it's a little bit small, but the resources are grain, fine cheese made of goat's milk, timber, wild game, and there was wool from the sheep, which was turned into cloth. And some of the most important crops are olives, which was turned into oil, grapes turned into wine, grain and clay was used for pottery.
These are the most important, of course, olive oil, right? Grapes, grain, and clay for pottery. So let's start with, if we can break it, we can break Greek civilization down into different periods. So what are the main three that we're going to focus on in this unit? Let's get a new reader. Sabrina, please.
Yeah, okay. So the three major periods of ancient Greek civilization were 1. Early civilizations, Minoans, Crete, and Mycenae.
Mycenae.
Mycenae. 2. Classical Greece, the flourishing of art, literature, philosophy, domination by Sparta and Athens. And 3. Hellenistic Age, Macedonia Empire and Alexander the Great.
Good. So, I mean, these are, if we really want to break it down, this is how we can break it down, okay? So today we're going to focus on early civilization, but you also have classical Greece around 500 BC, and then the Hellenistic age around 330 BC with Alexander the Great. These are the main three periods. So we're today going to start with the early Greeks, the Minoans. But before we do that, I want to focus on our timeline. Okay. Now, this is Greece chronology. Now, this is really breaking it down. For the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to really break this down. Okay. Go through the Greek chronology, please, Sabrina.
Greek chronology. Mycenean civilization, 2000 to 1100 BC. Dark Ages, 1100 to 900 BC. The Geometric period, 900 to 700 BC. Archaic period, 700 to 480 BC. Classical period, 480 to 323 BC. Hellenistic period, 323 to 31 BC. Roman period in Greece, 31 BC to 323 AD. Byzantine period in Greece, 323 to 1453 AD.
Good. Okay. So before I showed you how we break it down into three periods, but this is broken down into even more, right? So today we're going to focus on Mycenean, but you have the Dark Ages, right? For the Greeks. Then you have the Archaic period, then Classics, Hellenistic, and then Roman. Okay. Any questions about this? So I'm going to show you something. We're going to go through an introduction to the chronology and the timeline. I think this will help you get a better understanding, okay, of where we are in Greece and where we're headed. Okay, I always love to look at the timeline. Geography and timeline. That's a good way to start any unit. right? Geography and timeline before starting any new unit. So I focused already on the geography of Greece. Now let's focus on the timeline. Okay. So please watch this. Okay, follow my screen. This is very important. Okay, what we're about to watch.
I am now going to give an overview of ancient Greece. In future videos, we're going to go into a lot more depth on a lot of these events and ideas, but this one is to give you context on the big picture. And just to start, let's begin with the name Greece. It turns out that the Greeks do not call where they live Greece, neither did the ancient Greeks. They called it Hellas. 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 And the word Hellas comes from Ellen. So this comes from Ellen, which is this legendary figure who is viewed as the progenitor of the Greek people. You can kind of view him as the father of the Greek people. And it's not well established in the historical record when Ellen actually existed, but this is where we get the name Hellas from. And it's very important. Do not confuse this Ellen, who was a man, with Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy was a different person. When I was a child and I heard about Hellenic things or the Hellenic period or the Hellenes, I was like, oh, maybe that's something to do with Helen of Troy. No, that's referring to the Greek progenitor Ellen. And so that's where the word Hellas comes from, and ideas like Hellenes, which is the Greek people, or Hellenic, which is referring to something that is Greek, or the Hellenistic period, which we'll talk about in many videos from now, which is this period of Greek influence, not just over Greece and the Anatolian Peninsula, but over Persia and over Egypt. So with that out of the way, let's now talk about the big arc of history of ancient Greece. And it's believed that the Greek peninsula has been settled by human beings for thousands and thousands of years. And as time goes on, we'll hopefully understand more and more about them. But my timeline right over here starts with Mycenean Greece.
Okay, so if you see here, this is great. He has underneath the timeline under here. So Mycenean, Dark Ages, down here the Archaic, Classics, and Alexander and the Hellenistic period. So he's going to just quickly go through each of these on the bottom. Okay.
It starts with the end of Mycenaean Greece. In other videos, we might talk more about the Mycenaean Empire. And as that empire falls, we enter into the Greek Dark Ages. And the reason why it's called the Dark Ages is there's not a lot of historical record of this period, roughly between 1100 BCE and 800 BCE. Now, there's one event, and I'll kind of say that with a slight emphasis or a question, that is worth noting here. I have Trojan War ? Around 1200 BCE. Once again, there's not a strong historic record for the Trojan War, but it is a famous war that was chronicled by Homer. And even Homer, we don't know if he really existed or whether he was an entire literary tradition, but it was chronicled in the Iliad and the aftermath in the Odyssey. And once again, this was chronicled many hundreds of years later, and even Homer is a semi-legendary figure. But when people talk about the Trojan Wars or you see movies about it, we're talking about something that, if it happened the way it happened, it's on the order of 1200 BCE. Now, as we exit the Greek Dark Ages, that's when we start to have some of the institutions that we now identify with the ancient Greeks get established. You have the Oracle at Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi, often known, or Pythia, often known as the Oracle of Delphi. This is where leaders of the Greek city-states went for direction, to understand what was likely to happen, to get prophecies. And this institution, the Oracle at Delphi, lasts through this entire period I have on my timeline into Roman rule for over 1,000 years, where the Oracle of Delphi is a very, very prominent figure in influencing Greek leaders. At around the same time, you also have the Olympic Games, where they are held at Olympia, where people compete to show their athletic prowess. And this ancient Olympic Games, once again, it continues on for over 1,000 years. Our modern Olympics are, just kind of a flash in the pan, which and it was obviously modeled after the ancient Olympics, compared to how long this lasted. Now, when most people think of Greece, they're actually talking about classical Greece. So this is the classical period right over here. And we're going to do videos on a lot of these events, but it's roughly the period between the Persian invasions that were successfully put off and the rise of Alexander and the fall of Alexander. And that's where you have all of these ideas of Greek democracy really kind of coming to the surface. Pericles, the strategos of Athens, who had the influence to really help democracy flourish under his leadership or during his leadership. You have the Acropolis and the Parthenon, these famous icons of Greek culture being established. But once again, this is in this period. That's in this period right over here. This is also the period that we associate with the famous Greek philosophers. These lines right over here are the lives of Socrates and Plato, who's Socrates' student, established the famous academy. Aristotle, who was Plato's student and famous tutor of Alexander the Great. Now, as I mentioned, you had these city-states, and the ones that are worth mentioning, or all of them are worth mentioning, but I have in this diagram the most significant city-states of ancient Greece that you'll hear a lot about. We talked about the Oracle at Delphi, the Olympic Games at Olympia. A lot of the conversation tends to focus around Sparta and around Athens. And then you'll also hear a lot about Corinth and Thebes. Sparta is famous for its militaristic society. It's often glorified, but it's also worth noting that they were significant slave owners at different parts in Spartan history. They had somewhere between 7 and 20 slaves for every Spartan. Athens is famous for its philosophy. It's famous for its the birthplace of democracy. It's famous for its art. It's famous for its architecture. Actually, all of these areas are famous for its architecture. But it's also worth noting that during the Golden Age, and you have the Athenian Empire, they were also pretty brutal in putting down rebellion and in some ways subjugating different people. So it depends how you want to view things. And we're going to have a lot of videos on all of these things. But at that time, we talk about these city-states, even though they shared a common language and common culture, they sent folks to the Olympic Games, they went to the Oracle of Delphi, they were independent states. And it wasn't until you have Philip of Macedonia in the 4th century right over here, where he starts to really unify these Greek city-states. And it culminates with his son, Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great not only unifies Greece, but he takes over the Persian Empire and really kind of, with his death, and he has a very short life, he ushers in the Hellenistic period, where you have Greek culture influencing that entire region, not only Greece, not only what was the Persian Empire, the Middle East, Egypt. That whole region gets influenced by Greek culture. And Greece at the end, finally gets under Roman control, and it depends which date you want to use it. In the middle of the 2nd century BCE is when Greece itself falls to Rome. But then other parts of, the Hellenistic world finally succumb to Rome. For example, Ptolemaic Egypt in the 1st century BCE. But even then, even when it becomes part of the Roman Empire, it influences the Roman Empire very, very, very heavily. Now, other things that you will hear us talk about when we discuss the Greeks, besides the democracy and the philosophy, we're going to talk a lot about wars. And it's worth noting what Greek warriors look like. So this is a depiction of hoplites, which are Greek citizen soldiers in ancient Greece. And you'll also hear about a phalanx. A phalanx is the formation where they walked or they marched very tightly together. And when archers came, they would put all their shields up and they'd almost be like this armored tank. And it was a very effective method of warfare. Another word that you will hear associated with Sparta and those slaves is helots. Those were the names of those slaves, and they weren't owned by individuals. They were actually owned by the state. Now, some of the other cities here, Corinth will come up a lot. It has a very strategic location in the Isthmus of Corinth. Notice to get from the mainland, or I guess into the Peloponnesian Peninsula, you have to go through this isthmus. Thebes right here was a significant rival to Athens at different periods of Greek history. It was the dominant city. Now, the last thing I want to mention is there's just a ton of culture that comes from the Greeks and a lot of words that we even use today. For example, the word draconian, which is used for something that's very harsh. Well, that comes from Draco's law, which came in the 7th century BCE from Athens. He was an Athenian legislator who composed a very harsh series of laws, and that's where the word draconian comes from. When people say something is Spartan, they kind of imagine it's something that's very basic, or you just have the necessities. And it comes from the idea of Spartan culture, that they really, everything revolved around military necessity. Even the word laconic, which means someone who doesn't, says just enough to get their meaning across. It comes from the region where Sparta is, Laconia. The Spartans were famous for their kind of very terse speech. Famously, when Philip of Macedon was threatening the Spartans, and he's saying, if you don't come onto my side, I'm going to do this and that to you. If you don't become part of my kingdom, my empire, I'm going to do this to your city. I'm going to do that to your people. And the Spartans' famous reply was, if, which is kind of a good example of laconic speech. With that one word, they were able to convey a lot. So I'm going to leave you there. In the next few videos, we're going to go into some depth on this. But it's important to realize that when people talk about ancient Greece, they're talking about a large span of history. And most of what we associate with ancient Greece, the Acropolis, the Parthenon, the Persian Wars, the great Greek philosophers, most of that is associated with the classical period, often associated with the Golden Age, which is right around there. That well before this period, the Greeks weren't all, these philosophers sitting around in togas. They might have been wearing togas, but at these earlier periods, they were more adventurers and conquerors, and they might have been in small villages, and eventually those evolved into the city-states that, especially in Athens and Sparta, had their golden age in this period right over here.
Hope you guys like that. I hope that helped kind of go through our timeline here. Did that help? We have a better understanding now of the chronology of ancient Greece. Again, we are going to focus today on Mycenean, early Greece. Okay. So, Sabrina, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
You're still with us. Okay. Early Greeks, the Minoans. Tell us about them.
Early Greeks, the Minoans, 3200 to 1100 BCE. They lived on the island of Crete, were great navigators and farmers, developed linear A, palace-led political, social, and economic organization at Knossos, artistic expressions and grand construction, and advancements in bronze-built sanctuaries, Minoan myth of King Minos at Knossos, the Minotaur.
The Minotaur. You ever heard of the Minotaur, Sabrina?
Yeah, it's a good myth.
Yeah, the myth of King Minos. Okay. And here is the palace of Knossos. Okay. Here it is. Here it's beautiful. Most powerful monarch for the Minoans. A lot of frescoes like this. Murals and frescoes of the bull. Let me, I've posted two PowerPoints. One is kind of condensed. This one here is mine, the one that says my name. And it's just, it's a little bit more thorough. Okay. Here we have, again, the Minoans and the Myceneans. We kind of lump them together. Here's Mycenae. Here's Crete. And here's Knossos right here, kind of in the middle north. Oh, who is that, Sabrina? Who is that?
Europa. Wait, was she? Can I take like a guess? Like
Go
she
ahead.
was like Zeus turned into a bull, and then she rode on him, and then that's what happened, right? Like she's the girl that got
She got kidnapped or something.
yeah when Zeus turned into a bull.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's yes. Let's read, please. Europe.
Minoan civilization, Europe, named after Europa, the daughter of the king of Phoenicia who settled on the island of Crete with Zeus, had a son named Minos who became a great Cretan king, and during his reign, Crete became a great civilization called Minoan. Minoan success was based on trade, not conquest. They contacted peoples in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Minoans were not Greeks, rather they had migrated from Asia Minor, Turkey, as early as 5000 BC.
Good.
Wait, sir, was Minos the one that like sent people to the labyrinth to be eaten or something?
Yes. Yep.
So wait, he's not real, or is he just like
Well,
a myth?
we're gonna find out. Hold on, we're almost there. King Minos. There he is. Nice hair. Yeah. Living like a king. Dina, please.
The Minoan king lived in the capital city of Knossos in a maze of a palace with 1,500 rooms. It was a gorgeous palace. But during Minoan times, even poor people on the island of Crete had four-room houses with running water for drinking and bathing, and bathrooms that flushed. This was a very advanced civilization.
Good, yes. Here's more frescoes at the palace. Beautiful colors.
The palace at Knossos, site of the largest and most important palace on Crete, center of political power, center of exchange for Minoan economy. Arthur Evans discovered palace and labyrinth, maze of small rooms in the Minotaur, advanced plumbing and washrooms. The walls of the palace were covered in colorful frescoes. These frescoes tell us about the Minoan civilization.
Good. So when we think of the palace here on Crete, um, we think of a great political power, right? This was the center of that power. For the first time, we're really seeing this advanced plumbing systems with washrooms. Okay, that's one of the legacies of Crete as well, along with these beautiful frescoes of the Minoans. And it was founded by this man, Arthur Evans, who discovered the palace and the labyrinth, which is a maze, right? And that's where we have the story of the Minotaur. More Minoan frescoes of these dolphins. When I went to Crete, it was 4 years ago, maybe. I was only there for a day because it was a cruise. And I said, I have to pick up a vase or a vase with the Minoan frescoes. So I have a beautiful one at home. If I were to see you, I would have brought it in. But yeah, it's really, really nice. And when you go there, it's very popular. Keep reading.
Historic records, Minoan art. Bulls represented the sun god. Bull leaping was the favorite sport for the Minoans. Illustrates their obsession with the power of the bull. Bull's horns, frescoes, and power of the Minotaur. Labrys, double aches carved everywhere around the palace.
Yeah. They love their bulls. They love their horns. You saw it everywhere in the palace. And now the legend of the Minotaur. Look at him here, strong. The
Oh,
legend, please.
Greeks preserved a myth about King
Minos. King's wife gave birth to a minotaur. The minotaur was imprisoned in a maze-like structure built by Daedalus called the Labyrinth. King Minos forced people of Athens to send 7 young men and women each year as a sacrifice for the minotaur, until Theseus, with the help of Ariadne, helped kill the monster.
Good. Let's. I have here a little short video about it. Okay. Theseus and the Minotaur.
After King Minos of Crete defeated King Aegeus of Athens, he demanded that the Athenians send 7 young men and 7 maidens every year to Crete, there to be sacrificed to a savage monster with a bull's head and a man's body called the Minotaur. Aegeus' son, Theseus, volunteered to go as one of the 7 young men and kill the Minotaur. He told his father that on his return, he would replace his ship's black sails with white ones to let Aegeus know that he had succeeded. The Minotaur lived in a maze called the Labyrinth, from which no one could escape. It was designed by the master inventor Daedalus. When Theseus arrived in Crete, Minos' daughter Ariadne fell in love with him and gave him a ball of string so that he could find his way out of the maze. Theseus entered the labyrinth, slew the Minotaur and led the Athenians to safety. But on returning to Athens, he forgot to fly white sails, and his father, thinking his son has been killed, threw himself to his death in the sea, which thereafter became known as the Aegean.
Wow. Wow. Okay, that's this. Just a quick story of Theseus and the Minotaur. I did attach a short reading about it, which you're going to do later, but fun little story there. Okay, let's keep going. Clues to civilization. Minoan script.
Linear A type of script not yet deciphered. It's not Greek. Michael Ventris deciphered Linear B in 1952, found at Knossos 1450 BC. Increases knowledge of early Greek history. We also believe that Greek writing was used on the mainland and in the Crete 6 centuries before the Greeks adopted Phoenician alphabet.
What happened to them? What happened to the Minoans? What happened? These poor Minoans. Dina.
1750 BC, earthquake destroys Minoan palaces. 6028 BC, volcano erupts at Santorini. 1450 BC, war between the Minoans and the Myceneans led to decline of power.
The poor Minoans, right? The Myceneans are a powerful people and a powerful civilization that is emerging. Take a look at where it is, Mycenae. So due to natural disasters and this emergence of a new powerhouse called the Myceneans, okay, we have the decline of the Minoans. So let's learn more about the Myceneans now. Okay. Mycenae. Let's get, who would like to read for me? Nathan, are you there, Nathan?
Yes, I am.
All right. Go ahead.
Starting from where to where?
Right here. Myceneans.
Okay, so a new tribe, the Myceneans, came to power on the Greek mainland. The invasion was successful because the Greeks could not protect the shorelines of Crete with their navy, and the palaces lacked any defensive walls and were not built with defense in mind.
The Minoans were great traders, good builders, but they were not known as great warriors and defenders. But the Myceneans were. Okay. Go ahead. Nathan, don't stop.
Oh, I was muted, my bad. So Greek sailors were called Argonauts and attacked and stole from the Minoan civilization, and they traded as far as Sicily. They lived in city-states and were involved in the Trojan War.
Greek sailors called Argonauts, right?
Mhm.
That's a name that we know well, the Argonauts.
Okay, so in by 1450 BC, Mycenaeans left the mainland and were conquered by Crete. No, and conquered Crete. Yes, Ramses II will fight Hittites to a draw in Kadesh, weakened both severely. Mycenae was able to move their trading areas and dominate the trade. And 1200 BCE, there was a Trojan War at Troy. Black Sea Straits.
Good. So the Mycenaeans were a warlike people, right? Great warriors. Okay, they fought with everyone whom they came in contact with. Okay, the Mycenaean age is sometimes referred to as the heroic age or the age of the heroes. Okay. And what happened? So what brings us to the Dark Ages around, we'll say, 1100-ish? What happened? What were the Dark Ages?
The invaders from abroad, called the Dorians from northern Greece / Macedonia, invaded. So between 1100 and 1050 BC, the Greek population declined by 75%. All city-states of Mycenaean territory were destroyed, including Athens and Sparta. Wow.
Good. So the Dark Ages came in because of these invaders from the north, okay, called the Dorians. They were from Macedonia, right, just north of Greece, okay, called Macedonia. Okay, so the population declined by 75%. Wow. Wow. That's huge.
Yeah.
Now, this brings us into the Dark Ages where we just don't know much, right? We just don't know much of the Greeks at this time. Okay, and this will last up until about 800, 900 BC. Okay. So tomorrow's lesson is going to be on the Trojan War. Okay, we're also going to watch the movie called The Trojan War. Some of you might have seen it with Brad Pitt, maybe. Yeah, but we're going to watch that tomorrow. Okay. Okay, any questions for me so far? I know I've gone through a lot of history there. Any questions on Mycenaean or Minoan? No questions? Okay. All right. So good stuff. Good stuff. I have one more video I do want to show you that's really going to take us in depth into the Minoan life. While you're watching that, it's about 20 minutes long. I'm going to get your work ready. Okay. So we're going to watch the video and then we have questions after. Okay. So let's watch. Turn your mic up. Come on, Nathan.
I should just get an automatic mute.
That's okay. All right. Hopefully everybody's with me here. Yeah. Okay. Follow me. Being Minoan and Mycenean, what was it like? No one can explain it better than this guy. Very good.
It was the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that made possible the civilization that flourished in Mesopotamia for 2,500 years. It was the Nile that made possible the civilization that flourished in Egypt for a much longer period. But rivers are no longer part of our story. Instead, the sea is the Mediterranean Sea and the islands dotted all over it. In time, there came to be some 1,500 Greek settlements scattered all over the Mediterranean and the shores of the Black Sea, like frogs around a pond, as Plato delightfully put it. The Mediterranean facilitated contact between diverse peoples on an unprecedented scale in human history, not only between Greeks and Greeks, but also between Greeks and Egyptians and Phoenicians and Lydians and Carians and Persians and so on. In today's lecture, however, I'm going to ask you to first imagine that you're a Minoan, a people whose name derives from the legendary king Minos of Crete. Minoan civilization flourished for nearly 2,000 years, from about 3,000 to 1100 BC, though its heyday was in the first half of the second millennium BC. The Greek historian Thucydides believed that the Minoans were the first people to build a thalassocracy, that's to say, an empire based on control of the sea. That would have been a new use of ships in the ancient world, though human beings were surely engaging in piracy and piratical raids on coastal communities ever since ships were invented. And a thalassocracy is merely a highly organized form of piracy. The center of Minoan power was the island of Crete, specifically the palace of Knossos on its northern shore. Knossos was excavated by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans in the early 1900s. And like all archaeologists of his day, Evans was interested primarily in the upper crust of society. He wasn't much interested in daily life, so many artifacts that would be routinely preserved today in the course of an excavation were simply chucked away. But today, we're going to give Knossos a miss and sail to the tiny volcanic island of Santorini, one among a group of islands that we call the Cyclades, which lies 60 miles to the north of Crete. We're going to look at what happened to its inhabitants in the space of just 24 hours or less. There were Minoan settlements throughout the Cyclades and beyond, but the one on Santorini was particularly prosperous. Somewhere between 1650 and 1500, however, a catastrophe occurred of the kind that is all too familiar in the contemporary world. Santorini experienced a cataclysmic volcanic eruption, and around this time, your town, it was a town, not a village, situated on the south coast of the island near the present-day village of Akrotiri, was destroyed, though we don't know absolutely for certain whether it was the eruption itself that destroyed your settlement. There's a less likely theory that it was destroyed by an earthquake that occurred 25 to 50 years earlier than the volcanic eruption. The volcanic eruption was enormous. Volcanologists estimate that it was 4 times greater than the one that destroyed Krakatoa in Indonesia in 1883, and it came without any warning at all. Let me rephrase that. There were probably some warning signs, but you didn't know how to interpret them. The local springs dried up, There was a smell of sulfur in the air, and there were occasional earth tremors. But you had no idea that your life was in danger. So there you are, living contentedly in your village when one day or night, somewhere between 1650 and 1500 BC, you hear a continuous burst of thunder. And when you go outside to investigate, you see plumes of smoke filled with debris trailing upwards into the sky from the mountain that broods over your island. At first, all you can do is to stare up at the mountain and the discharge from it. And then, as the air thickens and it becomes difficult to breathe, you quickly collect your senses. You scramble desperately to gather your family together. You just have time to grab a few valuables, some jewelry, a figurine or two of the deities you worship, scraps of food, a pitcher of wine, all of which you stuff into a wicker basket. Soon the sky is pitch black. You can no longer tell whether it's day or night. You can hardly see your hand in front of your face any longer. All you see in the gathering darkness is a reddish glow coming from the direction of the volcano, now no longer visible. The air has become heavy with soot and ash. Everyone now is coughing and wheezing and gasping for breath. The elderly are already finding it difficult to breathe. Out in the street, there is pandemonium. People are screaming. They're terrified, running blindly in all directions, desperately calling out the names of their loved ones. You start heading towards the shore, or towards where you think the shore is, clutching your children, urging on your husband or your wife, groping your way, stumbling as you do so. You manage to escape from the town to the harbor. No skeletons have been found at the site, so everyone at least got away from Akrotiri, but only just in the nick of time. Soon, your village has been covered in lava flow and ash. What happened after that is a mystery. Did you and your family and your fellow islanders manage to get onto a boat and to sail away? Or are you either overwhelmed beforehand by the smoke and the burning ash? We just don't know. There's no evidence to help us reconstruct what happened at this moment. And if you do get on board a boat, are you able to row to safety? You may have been drowned by a hail of pumice, or you may have been submerged by a tidal wave. Or perhaps, let's hope so at any rate, you do get away and make it to Crete, where you're received and given shelter by your fellow Minoans. It's a terrifying story, but one that is becoming all too common in our own age of tsunamis and catastrophic floods. Every human catastrophe, however, is archaeology's gain, and that's a sad fact of life, because the people who fled the town of Akrotiri left behind very preciously for us their everyday items, their cooking pots, their baskets, their furniture, and so forth, which got buried and thus preserved beneath layers of volcanic ash known as pozzolana, which in some places lies 30 meters, 100 feet down. Pozzolana is named after Pozzuoli, a town near Mount Vesuvius in Italy, where this type of ash first came to light. The archaeologists who excavated the site have left the objects exactly where they found them, which makes Akrotiri, like Pompeii and Herculaneum, which suffered a similar fate, immensely moving to visit, even though it's on a much smaller scale than either of these cities. Excavations at Akrotiri began under the direction of the Greek archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos in 1967. And when you visit the site today and you look down at the streets, you are looking at a settlement, as it were, whose inhabitants have just gone out to lunch. It's tempting to believe that they'll be back in half an hour to carry on with their Bronze Age lives, all of which makes Akrotiri one of the most interesting archaeological sites ever to be excavated, even though a human tragedy overshadows the vivid picture it presents to us 3,500 years down the line. Well, let's now imagine your life on the day before the eruption. A very peaceful, prosperous, and contented life it was. The house you live in, like those of your neighbors, is at least 2, possibly as many as 4 stories high. It's made of the fine squared masonry that was common. It has plumbing in the form of round clay pipes which connect to the streets. The walls are reinforced with wooden joists to bolster them against earthquakes, which means that you know from bitter experience that there are risks attached to living on the island. But life is good for you and your family, and all life has risks attached to it. And besides, where else would you live? Your family has been living on the island for generations, and I said you were prosperous. How do we know that? Well, first, because Akrotiri has a well-protected harbor. That means pirates would like to raid you if they could. It also means that you're engaged, like all islanders, in export-import. And in addition to its harbor, your town also has access to a large area of cultivatable land. So it's good for both commerce and for agriculture. So the risks of living on the island are well worth it. The greatest glory of Akrotiri is its frescoes, or wall paintings, the Minoan equivalent of high-definition television. Almost every house has at least one wall painting, and I'd like to give a bit of attention to the frescoes because they tell us a lot about daily life and about the landscape of Santorini in 1500 BC. They're now in the National Museum in Athens. One room, for instance, was decorated with frescoes of antelopes and boxing children. Then there is the fisherman fresco. A young boy holds up his catch. And in the same room, there's a fresco depicting the aftermath to a sea battle. We see corpses floating in the water while warriors disembark from their ships. Perhaps the islanders had recently won a striking naval victory, and they wanted to perpetuate the memory of their victory in art. And at the top of the fresco, in the middle distance, herdsmen herd their cattle, oblivious to the scene below. Life goes on, as the Beatles pointed out long ago. What can we say about your mindset as a Minoan? Well, without written records, that's a very difficult question to answer. But I'd suggest that there were 2 ways in which you would have thought and behaved very differently from us. To begin with, there's a very good possibility that you practiced human sacrifice. At the palace of Knossos on Crete, the bones of at least 4 healthy children were found, butchered in the same way the Minoans slaughtered their sheep and goats, suggesting that they had been sacrificed and eaten. I'm quoting a British archaeologist called Sandy McGillivray. McGillivray adds that a senior Cretan archaeologist was so horrified by this suggestion when it was first proposed that he insisted that the bones must be those of apes. And then, in March of 2010, just as I was preparing this course, the Greek press reported the discovery near Hania in Crete of the bones of a young girl who had been sacrificed on an altar, I quote, like another Iphigenia. That's what one newspaper specifically said. It's a reference to the sacrifice by the Greek king Agamemnon of his daughter Iphigenia to secure the favor of the goddess Artemis. It's obviously a highly contentious issue. Who wants to believe that their ancestors were cannibals, like mine were? Those blokes we talked about in the first lecture who lived in Cheddar Gorge 14,700 years ago. But this is a lot more recent, and therefore a lot more politically sensitive. A second distinctive feature of the Minoan mindset is that you weren't embarrassed by female nakedness in the way that we are, at least publicly.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Okay, I posted the homework. Okay, so today's focus again is the Minoans and the Myceneans. I posted a lot of stuff here, guys. I hope it's not overwhelming, but it's just really to help you. So if we just go back and look at what we learned today, I've posted 2 maps. Okay, I posted the chronology and the geography of Greece. I have 2 PowerPoints and 3 videos. Okay. And I even posted here just my notes from the past on Mycenae. Now, this will be important for your chart. Just some additional notes on Mycenae. So I want you to take some time and just read a little bit from it. We're only going to spend 1 day on early Greece, and actually 2, because tomorrow we're going to spend time on Troy and the Trojan War. Okay, so if we take a look at our homework, if everybody can follow me, we'll go through your homework now. You can see here I created a new topic, Unit 2, Ancient Greece. And this is the first item. If you click that, and you go to Instructions, okay. I've posted your textbook, Echoes from the Past, readings 99 to 110 for early Greece. And there are 2 items here, pretty straightforward. The first one is the Minoan reading, A Legend of the Minotaur, complete questions 1 to 5. That's this one. Okay, so it's just a short historical overview with here's the legend of the Minotaur. It might be hard to read, okay, but try. And then questions 1 to 5. It kind of got cut off when I printed it. Okay, but you can see it's right here, 1 to 5. And the pages in your textbook. You can just use the pages in your textbook. It says it right here, 106 to 110. Okay. So that's first, and your textbook is this one. And number 2 is the complete the chart, the differences chart. That's this one right here. Okay. Again, you can use all the information you have or in your notes and what I posted today. So the difference between the 2 civilizations and similarities. Okay, so this is everything. If you could put all of this on one Google Doc, that would be great. This should not take you very long. Okay. Any questions, guys? You're very quiet. Any questions for me?